What's going on? Just jumping on to share some insights that I've been just contemplating on, meditating on, especially over the last couple of days. I listened to a video by one of my favorite YouTubers the other day, and she basically was proposing the question about, can we avoid negative events? And that's something that I've often thought about, especially when you are in the law of attraction, manifestation whole community. You know in some form or another that we are creators. Now, whether you think we are total creators or co-creators, you do know, I think it's quite public knowledge, that we all have a part to play in the creation of our reality. But if you're saying that we are total creators of our reality, that means that the total responsibility falls on our shoulders for everything that happens in our lives at every time, bad or good. And as smart and powerful and as creative as we are, and as much as we have divinity in us, in this incarnation, in this body, in this avatar, we're just not that smart. We're not that powerful. To have total control over our own lives, let alone everything that happens in our individual world. I think that will be too much power for us to wield in this flesh. I think that's why we continue to grow in degrees and measures. So I believe that we're co-creators. I don't believe that it falls all on us, but I also believe that we play a part, and that's why you see certain people. Not everybody reaches their destiny. It's not a matter of automatically happening, because if that was the case, nobody would die prematurely. Everybody would reach their destiny regardless of what they did or didn't do, and all those things. So I don't believe that we have total control, but I do believe we have a measure and a degree of control. And when thinking about can we avoid negative circumstances, it just took me back to the beginning of 2020, when right before COVID happened. I had never heard of COVID before. So I'm not one of those types that like seek God for a theme for the year ahead and stuff like that. Like most people are, I'm not coming against it or condemning anyone. It's just not me, but sometimes I do get the theme of the year before the year happens. And so the theme of 2020 was catalyst. I had heard the word before, maybe, never really paid attention to it, so I didn't really know what it meant. So I looked it up, and it's pretty much an agent that provokes change, or it's like an instigator or like a motivator. Pretty much it's something that puts fire behind your butt to provoke change or to speed up change. And so looking back in hindsight, that definitely serves to be the case. And 2020 turned out to be the start of, the weirdness that we've experienced these last couple of years on a collective and global scale like we haven't before, at least in my lifetime or recent history that I know. And so I said all of that to say is that it's something that I've thought about, because these last 10 years, especially the last 5 or 6, have been very traumatic and have been like, seems like nonstop tribulation and suffering, and tests and trials, and, just seems like it doesn't let up sometimes, kind of been like a perpetual wilderness. But just got me to thinking, because I know that a lot of what we experience on this physical plane is what's being mirrored back to us because of what's inside of us. And so whether we put it there or not, it's not our fault per se, as far as the paradigms and the thought systems and the programs and things that run subconsciously that's in us. Those things were either passed down to us or programmed in us immediately upon entrance into this matrix. And so it's not our fault, but it is our responsibility to deal with them, because they directly impact and affect the quality of our lives and everyone and everything attached to it. And so what we experience is a lot of our programming that runs subconsciously and automatically behind the scenes on autopilot underneath the surface. And so a lot of what we think comes from the outside really is being reflected from what's on the inside. But how much of that is programming, how much of it is just sovereign? Like COVID and the events that surrounding that does not have anything to do per se with, it was bigger than us, even as a collective. It's not necessarily something that we could have controlled. And so my thing is, how much of our suffering is self-induced and how much of it is just sovereign? Because I know that part of the objective of us coming here in this incarnation is to learn, to grow, to develop, and to transcend this physical material realm, and to learn and to grow lessons. And so we overcome through challenges and resistance. And so how much of that is already written and that's just like sovereign, nothing you can do about it, and how much of it can be avoided if we would just do the internal work. And so that's something that I reflect and I think about, because I know that unfortunately, just human nature, we don't really learn lessons unless it is induced by trauma or severe pain. And so those tend or seem to be the lessons that stick. Like, for instance, when you were young, it only took for you maybe once or twice to touch a hot stove or a hot iron for it to register in your mind that this is hot and that you don't touch it because you don't want to experience that pain. A personal example in my life, I used to be a nail biter. And so this was many years ago, actually, but I had bit my nails and I wound up developing an infection in my thumb. Like, it was a pus-filled bump on my thumb that was green, and I had to go to the ER in order to get it drained. And it was painful. And like I said, I was a nail biter, so this was a lifelong thing. And so it only took for that one instance years ago for it to connect and register in my mind not to bite my nails anymore, because I didn't want to experience the pain that came with it. Now, I don't know what it is about my cuticles, but a couple of years after that, I was working at a warehouse, and I guess I picked up the wrong pair of gloves by accident, and I think I had just freshly cut my nails, or I had like a hangnail and I pulled it. And so just that small hangnail being pulled, that small little piece of cuticle, and I wound up getting the wrong pair of gloves. I had put them on and it just didn't feel right. And so, fast forward in like 2 or 3 days, and I experienced the same thing that I experienced before when I had bit my nails, where I wound up getting an infection on one of my fingers, and it was just because I had put on somebody's gloves that had dirty hands, and I had pulled a piece of my cuticle, and that's all it took for me to get an infection. Safe to say, I learned that day to be extra vigilant and diligent and careful when it came to wearing other people's gloves. I had to pay more attention, but it took for that one instance. And a lot of times, our greatest lessons are preceded, which by that word, again, catalyst, that are preceded by great pain and great trauma. And what I found for me is that when I experience things in my life that are extremely painful, what it does is wake me up and I come back to reality. It's like waking up out of a dream. And we don't realize how much of our time is spent in our fantasy world of either dwelling on things of the past or projecting fear or things or trying to escape into the future. But we spend very little time actually anchored and present in the moment. And so when things happen, it like brings us to, it's like smelling salt. It brings us back to reality and it wakes us up. And it's like you waking up from like a bad dream, or you were like in a coma or something, and you come back to the now and to the present. And so a lot of times when that happens, I don't like the events surrounding it that brings me to that moment, but I often love the growth. It's called, post-traumatic growth or adversarial growth, to where the benefits that we get from going through or overcoming challenges and resistance. And so that feels great, but I don't like the suffering or the pain that precedes it. And so it just took me back to when I was a child. I wasn't a bad child. I was more so sneaky, but I hated butt whoopings. I can count on one hand how many times I had to be physically whooped by my mom before I learned that I don't like this pain. So in order for me not to feel this pain, I need not to do things that will lead to me having to feel this pain. So I don't know whether that was a good thing or not, because I didn't do a lot of things, but it did force me to kind of be more sneaky so as not to get caught. So I don't know if that's a good thing, but I said all that to say is that I knew early on that I didn't like pain. And so, like I said, making that correlation between not doing the things that will lead to me having to experience the pain that I didn't like. And so when it comes to experiencing things in my life now, especially when it's like a cycle or it's repetitive, it's just like it really forces you to, like I said, become aware in the moment, but it forces you to get to the root of it. It's like, what am I not getting, or what am I glossing over that is choosing for this coming back around to force me to have to keep experiencing this, because I don't like this experience. So what is it that I need to do? What is it that I need to get, or should I be getting? What is it that I need to nip at the root, because to not experience this pain because I don't like it? And so I don't know why the correlation between, like I said, having to experience things once or maybe twice and getting it versus things that we experience on a perpetual basis and we still choose not to get it. Like I said, it just takes me back to how much of this suffering that we go through is self-induced and can be avoided if we were to just be more self-aware. Not saying that we will ever be perfect, because within ourselves, if we don't like suffering and we don't like pain, then if it was up to us, we wouldn't go through anything because of comfort and security. And so even when I was thinking earlier, I was thinking like a lot of times when we hear the path of least resistance, we think that it is the cushy path of roses and lilies and unicorns and dandelions, but the path of least resistance does not mean the path of most pleasure. It don't mean that just because it's least resistance that it won't be any resistance or that there won't be any pressure. It's just the path of least resistance for us, according to our circumstances and our programming and things like that. And so if it was up to us, we wouldn't go through anything. And so like I said, I know part of the objective of us being here is for growth, for evolution, and to transcend. I just think sometimes as far as how much of the suffering is, how much of it is necessary, and, or how long, or, should it be things that we experience one time and then get the lesson, and then move on? And if that's the case, then, you have to look within yourself. What is it in you that's resisting, that's not getting the lesson? But so, like I said, before this turns into a whole ramble, was just some of my musings and something I was thinking about. And I'm not saying I've gotten to the bottom of it. I'm still searching and I'm seeking. I just want to propose food for thought.